Franklin Roosevelt, in his inaugural address in 1933, said, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." He was giving a message to a nation that had been facing depression for 4 years. The market had crashed in 1929 due to overconfidence, resulting in a lack of confidence in anything. Not having money can make one feel powerless. Bread lines are crowded and humiliating. Looking into the eyes of hungry children is gut-wrenching. All one has tried has failed, resulting in a fear of ever trying again. Roosevelt put people to work. The Civilian Conservation Corps blazed trails and built cabins in our national parks. Now, building vacation spots when nobody had a job is insane. But doing something was better than doing nothing. It was better than waiting around in fear. Fear can consume a person, paralyze them into inaction. My wife Gail and I enjoy watching a show, and I'm sure some of you have seen it, called Midsummer Murders. Now, being set in England, there are few guns. So most of the episodes have a scene where the victim watches in horror as someone walks across an entire room to stab them or club them. The evil part of us laughs at this spectacle. Truly, a real person could have used that 5 seconds to use some sort of defensive or evasive action. We suspect that the actor in the scene wanted to make the most of their moment. But perhaps in real life, people really do get paralyzed with fear. Fear sometimes causes us not to try to save our lives. Franklin Roosevelt's idea was not new. In 1851, transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau wrote, "Nothing is so much to be feared as fear." And perhaps he was borrowing from Francis Bacon, a philosopher who wrote in 1623, "Nothing is terrible except fear." But fear does have its benefits. It can help us survive. For many who do not live in the fictional Shire of Midsummer, it causes us to escape or fight for our lives. Fear can protect us from dangerous things. In Proverbs 14:16, "The wise one is cautious and turns away from evil, but the stupid one is reckless and overconfident." And Samuel Butler in 1664 said, "Look before you ere you leap." And there's the famous "Fools rush in where angels fear to tread." It is right to be cautious to avoid danger. But I distinguish that from fear. I call that being aware. The phrase "be aware" is often shortened to beware. Being wary has its place, but it's not as an emotional process as fear. It is thoughtfulness. It is the weighing of evidence before one decides to act. A healthy skepticism that preserves life. A prudence. The questing spirit must also be a questioning spirit. We must question what others say will happen, and we must also question what we hope to happen. But sometimes the situation is so urgent that we don't have time to think. We must act. Freeze only if that is your best way to escape. Otherwise, run like the wind. Fight only when necessary. But when you do, fight to win. Alva Bessie, in his 1939 book about the Spanish Civil War, wrote, "Fear is real. And there's nothing you can do about it but keep functioning. Keep your hands and legs and body moving and your mind focused on the task at hand." It's telling us to focus on action in the present. What are the actions you can take now that might bring a better outcome? Eckhart Tolle writes in his 1997 book, The Power of Now, the reason you don't put your hand in the fire is not because of fear. It's because you know that you will get burned. You don't need fear to avoid unnecessary danger. Just a minimum of intelligence and common sense. For such practical matters, it is useful to apply the lessons learned in the past. Now, if someone has threatened you with fire or physical violence, you may be experiencing something like fear. This is an instinctive shrinking back from danger. But it's not the psychological condition of fear that we are talking about here. The psychological condition of fear is divorced from any concrete and true immediate danger. It comes in many forms: unease, worry, anxiety, nervousness, tension, dread, phobia, and so on. This kind of psychological fear is always of something that might happen, not of something that is happening now. You are in the here and now, while your mind is in the future, and this creates an anxiety gap. And if you are identified with your mind and have lost with the power and the simplicity of the now, the anxiety gap will be your constant companion. You can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future. Reminds me of the scripture Jesus says, by worrying about tomorrow, you add nothing to your life. There's that sense that now is the only time we can do anything. And if we find ourselves in fear, we must think of what we can do now and not borrow fears from the future or fears from our memory that haunt us. But it takes courage to live each moment of the day. A steadfast belief that we can do something of value. The future is uncertain, and there are many outcomes And we can't control those. We can only control what we do now. And this is what Gail means when she was singing earlier. Watch me stand, watch me face the wind, watch me accomplish what I begin, watch me keep trying even when I'm scared, watch me be whatever I dare. I wrote this song for a woman who was rejected by her family after coming out of the closet. They told her she couldn't be who she really was. And she turned around and said, "Oh no, watch me." And she packed up her bags and moved from Chicago to San Francisco. Fear made her escape her toxic situation to leave home. But courage made her decide to take the chance to move to a whole new place and start a whole new life. Watch me face the wind. We need to face our fears. The only way to get through one's life is to live it. If one recognizes their fear, you can do something about it. I remember, it's got to be 20, 30 years ago now. I was in Atlanta, and I wanted to go see the King Center. And I took the bus, and the bus dropped me off about a mile away from where I had to walk. And so I knew I had to walk through this neighborhood. And it was kind of a rough neighborhood. And so I'm walking, and I'm trying to be as tough as I can. I'm just walking. And about 30 feet ahead of me, there was a woman, and she turned around and she said, "I see you." And then she turned around and started walking. And I thought, wow, I was walking so much that I was intimidating somebody. But more impressive was the way that she, knowing that she was being followed by a man who was obviously not from that neighborhood, they could probably run faster than her, because I was in my 20s and I was quick. She turned and faced me and said, "I know you're there." And that dynamic of just facing the fear just made, if I was somebody who was out to do something, I lost my element of surprise. And I was put on notice. And so that's sometimes all that facing your fears is just putting someone on notice, putting them on notice, saying, "I see you." If one recognizes the fear, one can figure out a strategy to overcome them or avoid them. Marie Curie wrote, "Nothing in life is to be feared, only to be understood. Now is the time to understand so that we may fear less." And she was fearless in her life. She conducted experiments with radium when people didn't know how toxic it was, and it was toxic to her. She died of radiation poisoning. But her life and her death saved many more people through the understanding she gave us. But most of the time, we do not die. Think of the worst day of your life. It's over. You beat it. You're here. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop and look fear in the face. You are able to say, 'I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along.' You must do the thing you think you cannot do. Watch me keep trying even when I'm scared. This is courage. It takes no courage to do things when you're not scared. That's the whole thing that what courage is. Being brave does not mean that you're not afraid. Being brave means that you are afraid and you do the right thing anyway. Shakespeare wrote, "Cowards die many times before their death. The valiant taste death but once." Nelson Mandela responded centuries later, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." Watch me be whatever I dare. In this line, I echo the wisdom of ages. Philosopher Immanuel Kant said, "Have courage to use your own understanding." That is the motto of the Enlightenment. Psychologist Rollo May wrote, "It requires greater courage to preserve inner freedom, to move on in one's inward journey into new realms, than to stand defiantly for outer freedom. It's often easier to play the martyr as it is to be rash in battle. Strange as it sounds, steady, patient growth in freedom is probably the most difficult task of all, requiring the greatest courage. Thus, if the term hero is to be used in this discussion at all, it must refer not to special acts of outstanding persons, but the heroic element potentially in every person. That's all of us. Each of us, as human beings, need to summon courage every day. How do we become who we say we are? If you believe in the right to vote, then what are you doing today to preserve it? If we believe that racism is wrong, then what are we doing today to destroy it? If we call ourselves a feminist, what will we do today for the cause of women? If we think that we are kinder than the rest of the world, what will we do to prove it today? If we dare to be merciful, who are we willing to forgive today? If we dare to be generous, what gifts will we give now? If we call ourselves creative, today is the day to try something new. If one dares to identify with any ideal, what one does in the here and now is what we must do to make it real. This is a daily struggle, and it's wearying. Perhaps we were not courageous yesterday, but today is a new day. Perhaps we are tired for being courageous yesterday. Then we need to get rested and ready to be courageous tomorrow. take the necessary steps to prepare for courage. John F. Kennedy said, "What really counts is not the immediate act of courage or of valor, but those who bear the struggle day in and day out. Not the sunshine patriots, but those who are willing to stand for a long period of time." What are you willing to stand for? And I mean stand in any way you can. Sometimes you need to physically stand. Sometimes you need to stand with your mind. Sometimes you need to stand with your spirit. It's what side are you on in any of the struggles of the day? Will you side with love or with fear? What struggle are you willing to bear? Our personal courage is a goal in itself, but it's not the only result. People are watching. By watching a woman bravely struggle to come out, I was encouraged to write a song. And I hope that song has encouraged others to face the wind, accomplish what they begin, to keep trying even when scared, to be whatever they dare. Be what you dare to be. And know that you are connected to other beings. Dive into the water of life. Make your splash. Let your ripples reverberate. You may be as poor as a mud puddle or vast as an ocean. Wherever you are, fearlessly do the work that has come to you, what your life calls you to do. You may be an inspiration to others that you did not even know were watching. This is our challenge. There are so many things in this world. I don't have to list them because I can hear the list ticking in your head. From existential threats to irritations to life and death decisions that you are facing. The life and death decisions that others are facing, and we need to find some way to help them. And it's hard. All this stuff exists all the time. I had a friend tell me once, it's so hard because whenever you do one good thing, you know that there are 10 other good things that you could be doing. And you can feel guilty about those 10 things you've left undone. Or throw yourself into the task of doing the one thing that you have the strength to do and the courage and the will to do in that moment. And have faith that other people are in the same struggle with you and doing their best to do their piece, their part right now. To worry is a luxury when there's too much to be done. Think of what calls you, what gives your life meaning. I read a quote, I think it was Pablo Picasso, the meaning in life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to share it. And I leave you with the words of philosopher William James. Be not afraid of life, Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact. May we bless and be blessed.